The opinions expressed in this program are not those of CISA 7 or Time Warner Cable.
What's your tomorrow?
I will entertain the first motion under resignations.
I move that the resignations as presented be approved.
Second.
Any questions? Sandy? Oh, sorry.
Franz?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Blackout?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Carried 6-0. Next motion.
I move that the leaves of absence as presented be approved.
Second.
Any questions? Sandy?
Maloney?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Franz?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Blackout?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Carried 6-0.
I move that the employment of staff as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Blackout?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Aye.
Franz?
Carried 6-0.
I move that the transfer of staff as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Becker?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Franz? Wagner?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Blackout?
Aye.
Carried 6-0.
And I move that the retirements as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Warren?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Blackout?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Franz?
Carried 6-0. That concludes our special board meeting. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? We're adjourned. And we will restart the work session meeting at 5:30. All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order. We have 6 board members present today. 1 member is excused. I'm also joined at the table by multiple members of our administration. To my left, Dr. Michelle Langenfeld, our superintendent, our board secretary, Sandy Heller, and our Intercity Student Council president, Lo-Keem Chang. First, we start with our open forum. This is a time for members of the community to speak before the board about any issue that they would like. I have no forms filled out today, but is there anyone here who would like to speak before the board? Seeing none, we'll move on to our teaching and learning work session, which will be facilitated by Katie Maloney.
Thank you, Brenda. We have several discussion items this evening, and we will begin with reporting systems and grading policy and student grading and reporting procedures rule.
Good evening, members of the Board of Education. My name is Mark Smith, for the general public, Assistant Superintendent responsible for continuous school improvement. I'm joined at the table by Mike Fries, the Director of Teaching and Learning for Secondary Schools. Tonight, we will bring you a recommendation for revision of Board Policy 345.1, Reporting Systems and Grading. As part of the district's continuous improvement process, we have been evaluating our current grading system related to both student opportunity and student success. A grading task force was created during the 2013-14 school year to assess both the current grading practices as well as our current grading scale. During this time, a task force of nearly 35 participants representing parents, students, teachers, board members, and administrators set forth to assess and provide recommendations relative to this revised board policy. We're joined also in the audience by a few of the members of that task force. I'd like to introduce those individuals at this time. Mitch McMahon, a student from Southwest High School, was one of the student representatives on the task force. We also have Jason Bodwin, a social studies teacher at Preble High School, was also a member of the task force. We're also joined by Jared Valley, a science teacher at Preble High School, who's also a member of the task force. We also have Grace Adler, a parent of students both at Washington and East High School, that was a member of the task force as well. So I'd want to publicly acknowledge the work and the effort of all of those members that participated, because it certainly was time consuming, and it was an opportunity for some discourse that led to the recommendation that you'll see here this evening.
And the board appreciates your being here this evening. And sharing this summer evening with us.
Thank you. Additionally, the group put forth a firm recommendation that further analysis and an in-depth professional learning plan be generated related to our district-wide grading practices. As a result of the intensive work that was completed by the grading task force, the task force generated a list of recommendations. The task force believes that high academic expectations for all students remain a priority and should not be solely connected to a grading scale revision. Rather, academic rigor comes from teachers exhibiting high-quality instructional practices, clearly communicating those expectations to students, and then holding students accountable for those expectations. The task force also believes that a grading scale revision will allow teachers the professional flexibility to assess student learning and accurately communicate that back to parents. The task force also believes that revising school board policy will provide the impetus for further exploration of best practices related to grading practices specifically at the secondary level. At this point, a recommendation is made to the Board of Education while acknowledging still additional work to take place all of next school year. Specifically, as outlined in the cover memo that you've been provided, the following changes to board policy are being recommended at this point. We recommend that a numerical scale be used for grading student performance in secondary schools. We also recommend that only letter grades appear on report cards and transcripts, which is consistent with how they appear currently. We also recommend that the grading scale that you've been provided and is up before us be adopted, and that is a revision to our current grading scale. We'd also recommend that the adopted scale be implemented for the next school year. The new scale will not be retroactive for past report card grades or the recalculation of GPAs. Because GPAs are calculated cumulatively, we can apply a new grading scale during a student's 4 years in high school and still make connotation on a transcript that a revised grading scale went into place. We believe that this is the most appropriate thing to do at this point, recognizing that you have 4 different grade levels that could possibly be impacted by a new grading scale revision. We're moving the recommendation forward to the Board of Education because we believe that this grading scale and associated policy will provide our educators with a more clear and accurate representation of student performance. Teachers will be able to use pluses and minuses along with letter grades to communicate exactly where a student is on the continuum of learning progress. We believe that this grading scale also aligns with other school districts, which will enable Green Bay area public school students to compete on a level playing field for scholarship opportunities. We also believe that this grading scale will serve to encourage students to enroll in more academically challenging classes, such as advanced classes, IB classes, or advanced placement classes. We also believe that this grading scale reflects most colleges and university grading scales and what they're currently using so as to prepare our students for that college experience moving forward. At this point, we'd allow the opportunity for the Board of Education to ask questions, and we certainly would be available for our members that are here to provide any further context that you would have at this point as well.
Thank you. Mike.
First of all, thank you, Mark, and thank you to the other members of this committee. I think probably as long as I've been on the board, we've had students come to us through the Intra-Cities Council mostly and request some changes, saying that they were at a disadvantage with students from other school districts. So I'm really pleased that this has taken place because I think our students have been at a disadvantage in looking for scholarships, which you mentioned. But I think even more important than that is if this encourages more of our students across all demographics to get involved and enroll in more advanced placement and IB courses. I think that is the real advantage to this, because the more rigor that we can have our students be exposed to, I think the better off they are when they go on to college or technical schools or into the workforce. So I think that is the real key to this, and I'd like to thank everyone who made this possible.
Chris?
A couple questions and a couple comments. I'm also, as Mr. Blecker said, I'm very pleased with what's been done here. Student-led conferences, I'm really appreciative of seeing that in there. I think time has come, and I think that helps make our youngsters more accountable for what they're doing and helps them learn, because we are accountable not only there, but as we leave schools. A question, why no A+? You have an A minus, A minus, you have pluses in other areas, but not A+. That's my first question.
I think it's a great question, and we actually had that conversation. I think the most transparent answer is that this grading scale is applied in other districts, and it remains consistent with what other districts have done with that particular grading scale. And I do believe that it's certainly something that could be given consideration. We felt that the 4.0 grade point average associated with the A range serves as that communication towards an A+. But certainly, other than just really what we have and what we've compared to, we haven't seen other districts that have had an A+ at that particular part of the grading scale.
A+ answer. Second question, in number 1, it says teachers are to report to parents if there's not satisfactory progress. Now, I know satisfactory is used a lot through here, and I overall don't have a problem with that, but in this particular case, I'm not sure what that means, and when do they report? Is that at the grading period, or are they expected to do it at other times? Now, I know we have the system for those parents that follow it where they can go online and see where their youngster's grade is at any particular time.
I think that's a great aspect to look into. What we tried to do with both the policy and the rule is to provide enough philosophical stance so that we're grounded in really good practices around grading, but then also to layer in some expectations around communication. But also recognizing that we have systems like our Infinite Campus and Parent Portal that also serves as a communication tool to our parents. Our expectation specifically to that, Dr. Wagner, would be that at the times of grading periods and grading windows, that parents would understand if their student, son or daughter, is in jeopardy of failing, that it wouldn't be a surprise. And that is an expectation that we've held for many years in the district, and it's just really further exhibited there. So we recognize that a teacher can't always communicate with parents, but we certainly want them, as it comes to an end of a grading period, to understand where their son or daughter is, and to be able to be an advocate and to address the issue prior to it becoming a final grade.
Just so I'm clear, so say a youngster is doing relatively well, and all of a sudden they get a bad mark on an exam or paper, that doesn't mean the teacher has to run to that parent and let them know that.
Correct.
Okay. Point of clarification, because I don't want anyone in the public to misrepresent what I think is here, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. We have lowered the A from 93 down to 90 on up. And I'm afraid some people might interpret that as watering down the curriculum or rigors of the curriculum and standards. Have there been any changes to this curriculum standards relative to the grading? I don't think I was very clear, but I hope you understand what I meant.
I do. It was extremely apparent in our grading task force that all members of the task force recognize, parents included, that don't have that traditional educational background, that our further analysis of grading practices as it aligns to the standards that our kids are held accountable to needs to continue to evolve. And we're really, in essence, talking about standards-based grading. where we can clearly and accurately communicate to parents how a student has demonstrated their level of understanding towards a particular standard. So that is an ongoing exploration that we'll continue to look at. Our teachers that have implemented standards aligned to the Common Core have already moved along that progression, and many more will continue as we build our curriculum in our support system for our educators as well.
Just so I'm clear, by changing this grading scale, we have not watered down the curriculum nor the standards, and we are now in line. We had a higher benchmark there than other districts around us, or most of them in the state, if I'm hearing it correctly.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. The other piece I would echo is that the members of the task force and the opportunity is before us to communicate this out district-wide, that academic rigor is less about the scale and it's more about our expectations as aligned to the standards that we have for our students. And I believe that that is a wonderful opportunity, not only for our teachers, but also for our students in this district.
Brenda, he's done. Brenda.
I have two things, and to piggyback on that conversation, I don't know what page I'm on, the first page under number 3, where and I think it's the 1, 2, 3, fourth bullet point, teachers are encouraging work that is part of the initial process differently from the end process. And I think if we, through professional development, I know we already have a lot of teachers that are doing that, but that really moves us also toward more rigor, because we're putting less emphasis on the practice part and how you learn part, and then the largest emphasis on did you learn it, and I think that component will assure that our rigor is still there if that's how all of our teachers are looking at their grades. And then I have in the, I think it's in the policy, we're talking about all three, the policy and the rule?
Yep.
Okay.
Right.
In the policy, let me just pull this up. It's on the very last page, the second to last sentence, this does not, however, prohibit the use of special testing materials or techniques to meet the individualized needs of students. That to me, the way it's worded, just doesn't communicate rigor for especially for our students who have IEPs. And I have a suggestion, but just to kind of what I'm trying to portray.
Please.
I was thinking something like, this does not, however, prohibit the use of supplemental testing materials or techniques to help all students meet the course learning targets, something to that effect. Because otherwise that makes it sound like we're getting around meeting standards if we're doing this special thing, so that was just.
Your verbiage is exactly the intent of what that statement
Right,
was
yeah,
for,
right.
so.
I just thought this makes it a little more clear to me as I read that.
Thank you.
Any other questions
We're
or
gonna
comments.
suggested change for the board meeting next week, is that what you're suggesting, Brenda?
Yes, yes. And I don't know if do you want.
And it was duly noted, he wrote it
Yep.
down.
You wrote
I
it
wrote it
down,
down.
so if you wanna just, you can tweak it or do something, but just,
Sure.
you understand what I'm trying to.
Exactly.
Because the
communicate, so-
presentations we have, these are drafts, they're marked as drafts. And
Mhm.
what you typically do is when we go to vote on it, you mark any changes that have been made as a result of this meeting, and then we will, yeah, so he's got it down.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, thought of another one, go ahead.
Thank you. Had there been any discussion on getting rid of the Fs? So no one point blank could get an F, and maybe an incomplete, but Fs are not acceptable?
Well, there was a lot of discussion. We discussed as it relates to grading practices. We had in our district discussed at one point not counting zeros, the no zero policy. I think that would layer in nicely to our work around grading practices and assessment. So we positioned that for continued work into next school year.
To be continued, I think is what I just
To
heard.
be continued.
Right.
And I think it is, it's a needed in-depth conversation. You know, we also recognize as a task force that not only is teaching personal, but grading it's personal, and albeit you want it to be as objective as possible, it's a bit subjective in nature. So we want to be able to make sure that we're able to move folks along that continuum as well at recognizing where they are. And I think that this is one of those topics that we'll need to just continue to analyze. So yes, to be continued for now, but certainly not something that we want to ignore. We believe it's an important piece.
Mr. Smith, could you speak to, this came forward, obviously conversations through the student council, but for the city, could you also speak to the kind of data you might have collected in buildings from teachers, feedback? I don't know who you surveyed or any kind of data you collected to, as you move forward, that helped the committee come to these recommendations?
Yeah, absolutely. The task force prior to adjournment had sent out a survey to secondary teachers and asked for their insights relative to their preference on the existing grading scale as compared to the potentially recommended grading scale. And not only did we have a high level of voter turnout, we had a lot of people that took the survey, which was a really good insight, but we also had about 80%, if I remember correctly, Jared, 84% that were in favor of the revised grading scale. Is that accurate?
84.9.
Okay.
And did they articulate why they would be in favor of the change? What were the teachers telling you?
Yeah. Well, you know, I think that quite honestly, what they felt is the grading scale that we currently have wasn't meeting the needs of the students, and that this grading scale provided our students the opportunity. I also believe that there's embedded a greater flexibility on a consistent 10-point scale range that goes from 100 all the way down to 60. It provides an equal distribution of numbers, and it provides our staff that opportunity to really look at student progress over time.
And what kind of parent, I know I appreciate Grace was on your task force, what kind of parent input? I know I received an email today from parents after they must have gone out online and read somewhere about
Sure.
the new scale. Can you speak to the feedback you've gotten from our parents?
Yeah, well, I think the beauty in the task force is we had parents that didn't serve a dual role in our organization. We had some teachers that also are parents on the task force as well, so they were dually invested. And I would characterize the parent perspective as twofold. Certainly recognizing the inherent opportunity that the students will now have as compared to other kids in the surrounding districts. But I also feel as if the parents talked about the role that this grading scale will serve as a communication tool to them, that it will provide them more information relative to how their son or daughter is doing. And simply adding pluses and minuses to our grading scale will allow that, which we currently don't have. So that alone is another more accurate means of communication.
Would you please, just for the sake of our viewing audience, state what our current grading scale is? And you may ask someone from your committee. Yes,
Mitch,
if
do you have
somebody could
memorized?
just toss out our current grading scale, just so people know what we're comparing this to.
So does anybody have it recalled off the
I'll
top
take a
of their-
swipe at it here.
Okay,
It's been a few years
all
since
right.
I've graded, but I believe it's down to 93 or would be an A. 85 would be the low B, 77 a low C, and 69 the low D. I believe. Do I have that correct? 70. Pardon me. 70 would be the low D. And so not the same. If you do your basic math there, that's not the same number in between each.
No, it's not, and it also does not give students the opportunity to gain a little bit of an edge with the A minus or the B plus,
Correct.
things like that.
Correct.
And that's a big thing relative to other districts.
Sure.
So what you just said is if a student currently, anywhere from 85% to 93, we'll give them a B.
Through 92,
Yeah.
yes,
So
To
no
92.
pluses, no
So that gives them a
minuses.
flat 3.0
right.
on their GPA.
So there's a pretty significant difference between 92% and 85. I think most people would guess.
And from a parent perspective, to finish up on that point as well, parents on the committee appreciate the idea that pluses, minuses would be additional feedback. I mean, it shows that gradient within that, so they could better support their students along the way.
Feedback, perhaps incentive. Mike?
Could we invite Mitch to the table? I'd like to hear him talk about the student perspective. And
Come on down, Mitch.
I'm sure you've talked to other students, they've talked to you and others, and give us your perspective.
Sure. One of the big perspectives is that the big gap between 85 and a 92. If you're really close to an A or not that close to an A, it demoralizes you. You don't want to try at the end of finals. I think what we've done is split it off enough where it can help your grade point average to actually work towards the end of the semester rather than giving up hope. Because if you're at like a 88, I mean, what's really the point of trying to get up to an A? Because it's almost impossible by the end of the year. That was a big one. And the other one is that people are afraid to take AP classes because of their GPA, which is both logical and illogical. I mean, colleges are going to look at your rigor, but also if you need that financial aid and for scholarships, it would almost make more sense if you're really in need to keep your GPA alive. So that was another big one that I noticed when talking to students. Any other specifics?
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Okay. Can I ask Andrew? Okay, Andrew?
Is there a rule, or does Infinite Campus just do it for us about, if you end up with 92 point something, does that round traditionally 92.5 rounds up within the system, or how does that work?
It's based upon how a teacher sets up their grade book. And we've worked with technology to ensure that we can make the conversion appropriately. But there is an opportunity, and if you want to ask the teacher perspective, but there is an opportunity for you to set up your individual grading scale. I think the other piece, though, that we want to acknowledge is that there is the need to have professional educator judgment as it comes to finalizing a summative grade. We believe that this scale provides that flexibility. Does that answer your question, Andrew?
Well, I guess it would be, I think if I remember right, and it was a while ago, but although yes, there was teacher discretion, I seem to remember you had to get the full 93 to get an A, which in essence meant that 85 really to 93 was that'll happen enough times. It'll happen more times since there's a plus or minus on the line. And I guess I'm just a little curious if teachers can set that up individually, which actually I would have been in favor of doing it all that way, but now we're doing a lot of effort to set up this grading scale.
Teacher perspective?
We can't adjust the grading scale. We can adjust the final letter grade. So as of now, if it ended up 92.9, it would an Infinite Campus would it would result in a B. The teacher could then, after they submit their grades, could change that letter grade to an A. And that, I believe, is probably, from my perspective, I would say, by providing the opportunity to give the A minus, you will see that 4.0 mean actually have more meaning, because the child that ends up at 92.5 more than likely would be given the 3.67 because you had a more accurate grade for that child. But I don't know if that answers your original question.
Yeah, it does. I guess I'm not asking you to rewrite it. It just always kind of, it could be interpreted as that there's no real clear direction on a fractional grade, which I imagine they probably almost always are.
There is, according to Infinite Campus in our district right now, though, the teachers do not have the ability to change it to a rounding grade. We can't set up our own scale right now.
Well, we had a scale, right, we had a scale, and I guess we're making a new scale now, so this would, this would be the time to, I guess, decide what a 92.5 is, or at least be clear about what we're approving. So we are really approving 90 through 92.99 as an A-, but there is teacher discretion that if it was a 92 point something, that they might go to the full A there, if it's,
Yeah,
but only 93.00 would force the full A.
Yeah, and I think from a system setup point, we have to put the numbers in to get it up to that point. But I believe also supported in the policy is that teachers' professional judgment and certainly in consultation with the building principal and through a process to really ensure that a student gets an accurate representation of what they've earned in that course. Also, embedded in that is that we want students to grow over time. And that to me is a key piece, that we want students to show growth from when they started in the course to when they ended.
I had two other things. It mentions that the district discourages averaging of all grades and not having formative assessments in the average it together. When you put the district discourages blank into policy, what actually happens, I guess? I mean, we're not directing it,
Yep.
so I just don't know what that means, what level of expectation there is with a phrase like that.
Yeah. I'll give you my response, and certainly Mike can provide additional context. For us, it was about a belief statement that needs to be embedded within additional ongoing professional practices. So we want to educate our staff so that they're making good, solid decisions about how are they assessing a student's progress. But that is part of that to be continued.
You're laying a foundation.
Yes.
And then the last thing is, I want to say too, I know Ms. Jeffries really enjoyed being on the committee, and I feel bad that as my position changed at work, I just wasn't able to do it, but I know she probably wishes she could be here giving her input on that. The zero issue, and hopefully it won't be any later than the next academic year that's addressed, because zero, especially if it's a zero on a formative formative item, a piece of homework which we are discouraging from being averaged in, and I'm sure the committee discussed it at length, but the zero, especially if the zero can't be remediated, that's the hole that you'll never climb out of. It's nice that it's nice that the person sitting on a 87 that in the old system could not, even with 100 on the final, average up to an A. They have the A- to try for potentially, or at least the B+ if they're sitting at 87. If they're sitting at 40 because they're not allowed to make up work after an arbitrary length of time elapsed, that hole they still can never climb out of, even to a D. So I'm wondering if there's any existing policies that cover that, or are we still going to have situations where some students, for the exact same lateness of assignment, are dug a hole they can never climb out of, versus in other places they would get that opportunity?
I believe that again, we've laid the foundation to really critically analyze that. One of the things that we recognize we'll need to do is to create a committee at each of the secondary schools that will really do the heavy lifting around seeking input back from other staff members, but also then leading in some of the professional learning. So we envision that as an opportunity to build capacity yet this year in some of those aspects, but that would also, from a more global perspective be led by our grading practices task force. That as we ended this last task force, the majority of folks that participated wanted to sign up for another year of work on this. So that was a exciting piece as we continue with the momentum moving forward.
Another year, not another 10.
I feel that the group that we have that has been working on this is passionate. They understand things, and they're so balanced in their perspective. I think that was one of the pieces that the Board of Education can certainly feel confident in, that, yeah, you know, right down to the students. We had a diverse representation of student opinion, and they were as equally concerned about the advanced student as they were concerned about the student that may struggle. And I think that momentum is going to continue, and I would look for additional recommendations to come forward in the very near future.
I just want to say I can do Mike one better. Not only has it been on since, has it been a topic every time since you've been on the board, it's been since I've been on the board the first time, and it has been, unless they took a break from it for a little while in between, it has been since I've served on the Intracity Student Council as a student. So it's just really nice that.
Well, all right, as the board matriarch.
Yes.
Your task force has gotten it done.
Yes.
And I think you have presented a very reasonable piece. Obviously, your process was very thoughtful, and we know that it's going to be a work in progress in implementation. I appreciate that we are not sacrificing rigor, and that it's going to be a better situation for our students. And
That was such a great closing, I wanted to squeak in.
oh, that's right.
Just in regard to Mr. Becker's comment, one of the things as we look to zeros, and there is a tremendous body of research and evidence that I would assume your committee would look at, so that it extends far beyond just what we feel like. You know, I mean, I think that when we look at assessment and the work that we're doing through professional learning communities, that conclusion you come to, there's no other way to look at it. You start to recognize that there are absolutes in life that sometimes we put down for students that don't exist as grown-ups. You know, turning in a late assignment when I used to equate it with my staff, when your taxes are due, you don't just miss the deadline and not have to pay them. The reality is you still have to do the work, and how can we as educators know what students know and can do if we don't still expect the work, and then to not honor that. So there's a huge body of evidence that will be brought forward. I'm sure Mr. Smith and Mr. Freeze will bring that when they have those conversations. And the impetus is beyond, so this is a great start, I agree. And I appreciate the leadership of the students who continue to bring it forward, and the teachers and parents and the staff as well. It is a really good step in the right direction to ensure that our children have equity and rigor, and continue to move and make that acceleration that we're on right now.
I hate to, but I have to.
Oh, he must. Go ahead, Chris.
Both of you had some very, very nice statements, and I hope this isn't interpreted to be again that, shall we say. In terms of this being put to bed for right now, yes, that's for right now, but there's still more to do, as the superintendent just said. And within another 5 years or so, it'll come back around. Everything always does, so you know, nothing's ever written in stone or granite. There'll be continued research or other ways of looking at it, maybe no grades at all, you know. So I don't look at it as being put to bed forever. And a statement was made, and I should have written it down, something about helping our teachers do well with grading, something to that effect. I guess I would tweak that a little bit to say I think our teachers overall do very well with what they have to work with in terms of grading, the grading policy. And what we're looking at is trying to make it even better. Thank you.
Any other closing remarks? Hearing none. Thank you again. I appreciate the committee being here. Really appreciate your time and efforts. And no, we don't expect you to stay for the rest of the meeting. Go on, Mitch, you know you want. All right. We have the Head Start Program Guidelines and Operational Procedures, Policy Council Bylaws.
Are we gonna do that and then finish?
Graduation requirements?
Oh, I'm sorry, I crossed out two things. I thought we had done two things. We'll go back to graduation requirements policy. It's pushing us through. All right.
That's me again. I'm just collecting my papers here. I apologize.
I tried to give you a chance.
I know you did.
Mark,
Confused
go
me
to
a little bit. I was
I
going to
know,
leave
I tried to go
it.
to Jensen. I
But
tried.
it's good. It's good. Thank you. Good evening, Board of Education. We are bringing forward to you a recommendation to revise our board policy 345.6 around graduation requirements. We're doing so because primarily Wisconsin Act 63, which was passed December 11th, 2013. We believe that the revisions will update our existing current board policy. It puts our staff and our students in a good position moving forward. It additionally provides us flexibility as we continue to evaluate unforeseen circumstances that present itself on a timely manner. And I chuckle because there's a case in point that we'd like to share with you, a real-time example of exactly that flexibility. So I'll defer to Mike to give you that example.
Sure, yes, this is such a significant policy, and it encompasses so many things as being kind of that capstone piece for graduation. We anticipate that we'll have plenty of dialogue around this one over the year and the years to come, as you probably have always had. We received word last week that NWTC is not going forward with its practical nursing program anymore. We have other avenues for health science career opportunities. It wasn't a very popular program in the time that we had it as a district, so we will not be going forward with that. So before we would bring this to you for consideration for actually the vote, we would ask that on the policy, right beneath the listing under course credits number 1, we would not include the piece where students may substitute physical science for students who intend to enroll in the practical nursing program, because that will not be an option anymore. That further is played out in the rule explanation as well. On the front page of the rule, under letter or A1C, physical science requirement, we will be removing the language that refers to chemistry and general anatomy for a student who intends to enroll in the practical nursing program. So we were just made aware of that midweek last week, and we'll be updating that for the next time we see you.
So are you going to preclude the existence of a general anatomy and physiology class, or just strike the language about the nursing program?
Just the avenue there was for intention on enrolling in the practical nursing program.
Because it seems like, I guess if it were if the practical nursing program did exist, my question was going to be the same. If the course is good enough to be if the course was deemed an acceptable substitute for traditional biology, then it should be either good enough or not good enough, whether I'm doing the program or not. So,
Yes, thank you.
is the course being canceled, or is that
No.
to be determined?
No, that's not one aspect of it at this time. As we embark on science curriculum development over this next year, I think that'll shake out a little bit, but students were accessing the health science opportunities and a career pathway a little bit differently than what the practical nursing program was structured. It was pretty limited in scope. The kids just couldn't get into it. They couldn't make the scheduling work. They had to decide very early in their high school career, and it just didn't quite pan out the way we had hoped, apparently.
So you can still take anatomy and physiology as a biology substitute, so long as it exists, and you're just going to strike the.
Yeah, I believe we have to look at specifically the practical nursing program element of that. And as I was thinking through this prior to today, what we would do is we would provide you in the update this week what it was specifically, so that you had enough time to think about it prior to bringing it back. But that's really the specific element that we need to identify as a result of what NWTC is doing. So we certainly don't want to discourage students from taking any coursework in that particular area. Okay.
think, Andrew, something will come back as a proposal. So I have my fingers in this one just a little bit, and they're looking at, we honestly are all looking at this program isn't successful, how can we do it better to become successful? And NWTC kind of took that front step and said, we're just not gonna offer it anymore, then we'll go back to the table and look at what can come in to replace it. So down the road, I think you're gonna still need to have that flexibility.
So was general anatomy and physiology a cross-transcripted course, or was it just a high school course?
I don't believe for practical nursing it was it transcribed? I can't remember.
We can look into that and
Yeah.
get back the
So
details
that means
on it.
if it was transcribed and they, but I guess I just wanna make sure I like students having options, so regardless of NWCTC ending a program, that should not by itself have changed whether or not it's a good enough class to count for biology.
No, that's correct, and I would offer that I believe that the standards that are being met through the practical nursing program in conjunction with these other two courses created that umbrella of meeting the science expectation, and what we need to look at more carefully is the removal of the program, where might we have gaps in the standards that will be covered, and could it still be offered as a substitute because it's still comprehensive enough, or do we need to look at what Kim was offering, some other, so we'll take that under consideration.
A point of clarification, when you say the program, does that mean out at NWTC they no longer have the practical nursing program? Or is it just that they aren't going to work with the district on that program? Which one?
They continue to have the practical nursing program at NWTC, but we will not articulate that particular course because we're going to revamp that whole pathway and what that would look like. We've had, I think, 4 students over the last 10 years who've gotten into the program. Not all have completed it successfully because it's very, very rigorous. So we're going to try to develop a different route to get that same skill and that same opportunity with NWTC.
Well, we're developing that because they pulled the plug. Am I hearing that right or not?
I think it was both of us sitting down and looking and saying, okay, this is not successful. It's not a successful program. Every year we try to get kids involved. We try to encourage. No one takes it.
Advertise it.
How can we do this better? Right.
I was under the impression in previous years it was a popular program, apparently
It's
not.
the CNA.
The CNA program
is a
Yeah, and that one's going to
Okay.
continue.
Yeah.
Right.
This
And
is
that's
an
really
LPN.
program and very few students. And that's really where the conversation came out of, is in the discussion about the CNA program. How can we make this program just as successful, and then it's not.
One final question with this.
Sure.
How many students does this affect, and if so, in what way, and are any of our staff members affected by it at this point in time?
No, there's no one enrolled right now.
Oh.
So that was perfect timing, and that was part of the reason when we looked at it and had the conversation, this would be a good time for us to take a step back and improve.
So I'll continue on as a good example of the real-time revisions that we'll need to make to policy. Going back to the cover memo, kind of illustrated a little bit of the background information, specifically the following additional changes that we're bringing forward at this point. To change the name of the course Personal and Financial Management to Personal Financial Literacy, and that has been the name of the course that we've adopted, but we simply haven't revised or updated the board policy. Secondly, remove all verbiage on service learning hours, another example of something that has been discontinued. This requirement is no longer a graduation requirement, so we're going to update the policy. Thirdly, we'd like to change the verbiage of early graduation requirement to upon approval of the student's post-secondary plan and consistent with established district policy. This will align to our specific practices that our buildings are participating in right now, and it still honors the intent of the board's direction, I believe. The fourth recommendation is to change all off-campus and credit from other sources requirements to align with all new state laws and district policies, and we'll give you some examples of that as well. The fifth one is to change the verbiage on concurrent enrollment to dual enrollment. Again, alignment with appropriate language, and certainly in consultation with Melissa to update things and to make sure that we're on par. And then lastly, align all guidelines under high school credit to be earned in middle school with new state laws and district policies. So really, in summary, it's to align us to the state changes that have been made, certainly bring us up into speed in terms of what we've been practicing to clean up things, and provide us the flexibility as we move forward and address things that will continue to move our way. So we're asking that all of the changes that submitted be moved forward and certainly worthy of consideration. At this point, unless Mike or Andrea has anything else to add, we would entertain any questions or comments that the board would have.
Any additional? Chris?
I'm happy to see the change with financial literacy. And I'm going to say some things, you don't have to respond to it now, but it certainly is a concern of mine, and certainly there's more out there about it. You know, you don't see the pension funds, the other vehicles for people working anymore to save for retirement. Now it's basically being put back on top of everyone to take care of themselves. Public employees, teachers in particular, are still fortunate that way, that you have that other vehicle. You don't have to think or choose quite as much. So I don't know whether this course covers that well. And also, I don't know where else we're talking about financial literacy. It should, I'm sure it's someplace in there, but I just would sort of like to make sure it is, because I really think if we're preparing our kids for the future, they have to understand they've got to take ownership over their financial future, and not just, you know, car payments or car insurance. So.
Any other? Brenda?
I'm just curious about the law, because I thought I knew what it was, and maybe I don't. What's the age that children are required to attend school until the age of? Is there an age?
At what age are they required to attend
Yes.
until? It is 18. The law
Okay.
talks about being able to attend until you're 21, but you're required to attend
Okay.
until the age 18.
But then this early graduation piece allows people to graduate at 17. Is that written into the law that they then don't have to be necessarily in school until they're 18?
The high school graduation statute and accompanying administrative rules provide exceptions for early graduation.
Okay, based on the state.
Credit attainment and,
Okay.
Yeah.
right?
So so if someone graduates at 17, they could get a job and not be violating the law because they're not in school.
Correct.
And there's certainly a process that we have in place where we vet it out from a school counselor, and making sure that a parent is involved in that process as well. So there's a level of scrutiny that we apply to that, because we want to make sure that our students are graduating college, career, and community ready as well.
If I may anecdotally say that my experience would be more with youngsters not to get a job, but just work that way, but going on to higher education or post-secondary education or the military, and they had enough completed by the end of their first semester senior year. They wanted to get on with their lives, and those were where I saw exceptions being granted.
Good point.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, thank you, gentlemen, we'll move that forward.
Thank you.
And now, here's of the Head Start program guidelines, operational procedures, and policy. Sorry, Sally, got your hopes up.
We almost got here.
I know.
Thank you. We are here for our annual yearly presentation on the Head Start program guidelines and operational procedures and policy council bylaws as required by the federal regulations. And our team, Sally and Dan, have been working collaboratively with multiple departments in our school district, especially our legal department and our human resource department, to make sure that we are not only compliant with all of the federal regulations, but we are working in alignment with our state laws and our school district handbook and policies. All Head Start employees are Green Bay Area Public School District employees, so they do follow all of our policies, procedures, guidelines, and handbook requirements, in addition to all of the detailed information that you received that we are required to lay out in order to be compliant with our federal guidelines. So I would like to thank the team, and with that, I'll turn it over to Sally and Dan to speak with you briefly, and then open it up for questions.
We just presented this in December of 13 for this school year, so sorry that you had to review all of this in such a short time. But we did tweak, make some changes for the 14-15 school year, and I'd like to point out those to you. We will begin on page 6, and the only change we made to this was adding the school safety and security plan that was adopted by the district this school year. We move on to page 19. We changed our safe delivery of students procedure. We modeled it after the Green Bay School District's new safe delivery of students procedure. It's a little bit different in Head Start because we have bus monitors and safety harnesses on all of our buses, and our children return to our Head Start Learning Center on Harvey Street if they're not delivered home. But basically the procedure models the one that the district has adopted. We move on to page 25. We added the PALS assessment results that because this was our first year of implementation with the PALS. And we also added the report card to be attached to the Teaching Strategies Gold portfolio assessment system going on to kindergarten, to all of the elementary schools. And this is something that was changed across all preschool programs and not just Head Start. Then, page 41, I changed the timeline of our self-assessment procedure so that I'm not in such a hurry or late with the self-assessment to the board for approval in March. So we're going to begin the process in October instead of in January for our self-assessment, our yearly self-assessment, and have it to the board by February for a March approval. It's just I think the very last change is on page 85, and that is separate from the procedures manual. This is part of the Policy Council bylaws. On page 85, we added that the liaison from the school board, which is Mary, may be a member of our policy council, and Mary did attend one of our meetings this year. So, simple changes. Those were reviewed, as Terry explained, by district administration and by Melissa, and lots of Head Start staff. We review it numerous times before we send it off.
The parent policy council is also involved, as well as I know you're interested in the parent involvement in the process, so they also have an opportunity to review.
Yes, they do.
The students are a little to be engaged in the house. That's right.
Yeah, how Andrew appreciates student involvement, but.
Well, it's all for the students.
There's a limit.
Even he will, even he has a limit. He has his limits, and we appreciate that.
They might argue about some of our rules and procedures,
They
but.
might, yeah. Any questions or comments?
Obviously, you're comfortable with what you have here?
I'm very comfortable with it, yes. Basically, you know, we follow all district policies, but there are additional Head Start federal regulations that we must follow. So we put them into this manual so that we can explain our procedures along with the process as far as enrolling children right to our job descriptions. We have some unique job descriptions within Head Start, so.
Sally leaves no stone unturned.
No, thank you.
That's great.
Technical question. We have it here as part of our agenda online. Will this be online for staff and parents or anybody else who wants to look at it?
We have a staff handbook that's put together with all of our policies and procedures, including this manual, that all staff have and that parents have access to viewing as well.
Online?
It is not online, no. It's put into a handbook.
understand that. I just wonder if we moved to also online yet or not.
We have not. I mean, it's something certainly
That's
that.
something we could look
We could
at,
certainly look
definitely.
at doing. This and then numerous other documents to follow that are all regulated by Head Start, we could add online.
Just a comment first. This is a very robust program with a lot of 95 pages in a handbook. It clearly tells you there's a lot of regulations and guidelines, but the impact that it has on students and the starts in their education is so critical. How is this document or parts of this document communicated to our families who don't speak English?
It's all translated.
So if a parent were to come in, you have translators that would provide that.
Yes, we do.
So
Yes.
that parents should feel very comfortable then, would you say parents feel very comfortable when they come to Head Start?
Absolutely,
English is not
right.
their first language.
Right from the time they come to enroll their child. You know, one of the policies in here talks about busing, behavior reports, so on and so forth. All of those materials are in Spanish. So if the, you know, family of interest is bilingual, those materials are sent home in Spanish. All of the health documents that we collect, all of it is translated. Yes.
Brenda?
And how do you manage the rest of the languages that our children speak? I don't know if you have other language represented at Head Start, but I know we have a lot in our district. How do you manage the translation of Russian or
Mhm.
Hmong language, those kinds of things?
Within our staff, we have the Spanish bilingual interpreters, and we also have Hmong interpreters hired on staff. As far as the Somali, Russian, any other languages, we seek the ELL department in the district
And they
for
can help.
assistance, and they do. Yes.
Julie Seafeld is
Yes.
nodding yes.
Yes, Julie gives us what
She
we
has your
need.
back. Yeah.
Yes, we're very fortunate in that way that we can seek the assistance from the district. And we have families that help each other,
Oh, sure,
which,
yeah,
yeah, which
yeah.
is very helpful. Even the children help each other.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, thank you, Sally and Dan, appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
tonight.
Thanks for your time.
And we will move this forward. Our final action item is the scheduling of board superintendent retreat, and we were all given a date to consider. Is that date still on the table?
August
The 11th of
11th.
August?
Rumble, to see, well, we haven't asked
I
board
know.
members if they're really.
Right, August 11th, we will start there.
Doing 5 o'clock or?
Is all?
Does August 11th work?
Does
for
that work with
everyone?
everyone?
I'm good.
You know
Andrew?
if it works for
Yes.
South Steve? All right, well, we may have.
Chris?
Okay.
The date's fine, what time did you say?
Okay, what time do people prefer?
5.
What do you like,
Five.
Andrew?
Five.
Five?
Yeah.
Does that work? Five?
Until,
Well, if we finished all the items taken here, we all changed into the next calendar year, so. we can go-
Approximately.
And a 2 hour, I think, is a really, that's probably a good cut time after people have spent the day doing something else.
So 5 to 7?
Yeah. Do you say that'll work? I mean, it's a good start, but we know we have a number of things. And that's just Brenda's list, then there's ours.
Okay.
No.
All right, so we will put that down. And Sandy, will you please check this out?
Give it all to the bird.
That being said, that concludes our portion of the work session.
Thank you, Katie. Next is organizational support. Unless, does somebody want to take a break or? Yes?
Let's roll.
All right. Oh, Chris is nodding for a break.
No, I wouldn't mind.
Okay.
Well, it depends on, you know,
Now, if one person
Either
wants a
way.
break, we all want a
Well,
break. Go ahead.
all right, yeah. We'll take a short break,
5 minutes?
5 minutes. Work session, and that will be facilitated by Andrew Becker.
Okay, so we'll begin by moving the name of the Green Bay Area Public Schools former Job Center building.
And again, we purchased the building for alternative programs for this next school year, and as part of that,
We need to name the building, and Claudia Hendrickson has been the committee, headed the committee that determined the name that we are bringing forward.
Sure. So after acquiring the old job center located at 325 North Roosevelt, to service students with a continuum of learning needs under one roof, a school naming committee was formed per district policy. And the committee consisted of a DOB administration, or district office, building administration, a staff that would be working within the building, a student, and parents. After much discussion, we decided that it was important to tie the name of the building to a person who had made a local contribution to the whole child and our family. And this led us to Dr. Rosa Manoka Hill. And Dr. Manoka Hill was born in 1876 in northern New York to a Native American mother and a Quaker father. She married an Oneida man in 1905, returning with him to his reservation in Wisconsin. For decades, she operated a kitchen clinic at her house, providing care for Oneida on the reservation. She gained her state medical license in Wisconsin in 1934, and in her later years was honored for her contributions to rural medical care. In 1947, she was adopted by the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin. They gave her the name Yodagent, meaning she who saves. And the thing that I think the committee liked the most about her was that she served the underprivileged, and that's what we feel that we'll be serving in that building. So we thought it was a great tie to the community, to women, and to the greater community. Dr. Wagner was on the committee, so if he has anything to add.
Well, thank you. A lot of things were
I forgot to
looked
mention I had a
at.
school board member on there.
Yeah, made a mistake at turning the microphone over to Vinci. Kind of laugh at yourself. But we, the committee went back and they looked at, at least in terms of European explorers who owned the land first, owned by a French person first, then Whitney, the English person. And, but some of that was sort of ancient history. And again, the committee wanted to have something, honor somebody locally, from the area. And we have many schools, most of the schools named after males, so we did feel it was important, let's find a worthwhile female, and to find somebody from another culture was just icing on the cake. We're very pleased about that. I know Claudia also talked to, maybe you want to share with them who you spoke to about making sure it's okay to use this name?
Sure, I spoke to her grandson, Norbert Hill, who is the president of the education committee for the Oneida tribe, and he and his sister, who are still living in the area, are very honored, and the whole family was very appreciative and honored that we were going to be going forward with their grandmother. He wanted to ensure that we realized that she also she had extraordinary difficulties in her life. She raised 6 children almost single-handedly because her husband died when they were very young, and she did that and still practiced medicine out of her kitchen, and they just feel it's a great honor to her memory.
There's a Norbert Hill Center on the United
Right, right.
You shared with the committee a newspaper article about her, and if that hasn't gone to the board, perhaps you could share that.
The kitchen doctor,
That article, I think you'd really, it's fascinating, a bit of history in the area and what she was able to accomplish and do in her time period.
Okay, I can do that.
Thank you. Move that forward. Then, continuing on discussion items, we have under Human Resources, we have first the Senior Programmer, Manager Programmer's job description.
This position is a position that Diane has recommended that we upgrade from a regular programmer to a person who would be considered our senior programmer and also manage the programmers. We feel that with the amount of programming and the importance of programming that we do, it's important to have somebody in this lead position. The other thing we realize is that we have key programmers who know so much about our district, and if should we lose programmers, we would be in a difficult position to replace that level of knowledge. And is there anything else you wanted to?
Regarding the management as well, who else to manage and understand good work quality but a job alike? There's so much I know about programming, which isn't a lot, as much as a senior programmer would understand. And so the opinion is very important in the assessment of our programmers and moving our programmers forward. Accuracy is key, and that logic is key. And so having a job alike as the assessor is very important.
Next week, if this position, if there's no concerns about the position, we bring this forward for the board to vote on, and there would be a recommendation for a candidate, perhaps, coming forward.
Just to add to that, as we move forward with our data warehouse, one of the key pieces of the data warehouse that districts often can't afford to do a data warehouse is because they have to outsource the various programs that they need to customize their data warehouse. And one of the things that this individual would be able to do is be an in-house resource for us that will really provide for us, I think, a very customized look to the work that we need to do through our data warehouse. And without that, we would just be at the mercy of kind of thing. So I see this as a very much needed position, particularly as we look to the needs of our own teachers as they work to use data and bringing it forward and improving student achievement. I think it will save over time the taxpayers a tremendous amount of money to upgrade a current position rather than go outsource. And I've outsourced before in previous experience, and it's not cheap. So to have our own in-house to be able to use that will be a significant, I think, in fact, I know will be a significant cost savings over time, rather than outsource that kind of need.
That would be a difference in a position upgrade. Literally could be costed out in just eliminating literally probably a few dozens of hours of outsourcing that kind of position.
The time that it would take to acquaint somebody with something.
So I mean, I know what I have to pay for a mid-level tech support specialist when I have to outsource one. So a senior programmer level, even if they happen to be familiar, I would imagine that's frighteningly expensive.
Two questions. How many programmers do we have now, and are we saying now we won't have to outsource again?
We currently have 4 programmers on staff. We also have a temp who is doing work long-term as well because of the workload. And so, you know, there is enough work for them, but I'm anticipating, you know, as we're looking at other systems coming on board, transportation, sub-calling system, data warehouse, that we're going to need some adjusting, we're going to need some connecting and customizing. And so, you know, again, that's part of the reason for timing this out the way it is moving forward.
I'm not sure whether I heard that you're going to need to outsource
I'm sorry.
later on, or you're going to be asking for more programmers.
It's unknown at this point, because I don't know what these new systems will bring.
An argument, there's a plus and minus argument with outsourcing. You know, if the people we have on hand are capable of all the areas you want them to do something in, fine. If they're not, then you've got to outsource.
Correct.
Or get more people in, right? So I guess that has to be, you know, balanced somehow.
Okay. Anything else on that one? All right, we'll go ahead and move that forward, and continuing on, we have the accountant job description.
The accountant job description was developed by Ellen Wagner. This is the first, well, maybe not the first accountant, but first accountant in a very long time who we would hire. This would be another exempt professional, non-management position. And we would not replace the executive assistant, Patty, who was recently promoted to the manager of transportation.
Any questions or comments?
Just a technical question. Would you clarify for me or define non-exempt employee or exempt employee?
The person would not, as a professional level individual, we are able to salary a person, meaning that they wouldn't receive overtime. Our teachers are salaried, they're under contract, they're professional level. All of our management people in our district are salaried, they don't receive overtime. And this person would be at that level. The difference is it's not a manager. The person would not receive a contract. The person would be what we call at will, meaning no contract, not part of a bargaining unit because they're a salaried professional that doesn't fit into the bargaining
Thank you.
And again, this position is to, again, replace Patty Wolshinski. This position will, again, help me work on the budget, have somebody to work on the budget, and we'll also continue to do all the federal programs, the claims for the federal programs. And so it really is just a change from an executive assistant to an exempt employee, but having someone who actually has some accounting background, which I think will help much.
Okay, anything else? All right, we'll move forward. And next we have the English Language Learners Extended Learning Secretary job description.
As part of our work on job descriptions, we're trying to define more carefully and more clearly various roles. And so what Julie has done is she has updated the job description for the person who supports her department as well as Stan Kokas. And we evaluated the level of this position and determined that it would be upgraded to a level 4 from a 3. We looked at the essential functions of the position, and I think what differentiates this position is the level of knowledge the person has to have in the reports that they have to develop, and also the independent thinking that they have to have as they review the reports and make recommendations and clarify things with Julie and with Stan. So we're bringing it forward for you as a recommended new position, as well as an upgrade for the person in the role.
Brenda?
I'm curious with something that's a level 4, why your only required education is a high school diploma. And I guess I'm looking at the, qualifications desired down there. I guess I'm curious why you have those down under desired and not up under required. Do you think you won't be able to find someone with those
Because
qualifications?
it's still in the clerical bargaining unit, and, many of our clerical staff don't have the higher level, some have, but many don't have the higher level of formal education, but they have built up a body of experience and ability through the work that they've done that allow them to really function at a very high level.
And so I guess, yeah, I'm more wondering why that 5 years experience with Microsoft Office Suite, experience with educational grants, some of that doesn't find itself. I mean, I guess it kind of does. It's just not as spelled out in the required section.
I think it's because if the position this individual has that, but if the position were to come open, we would consider somebody who may not have that specific experience and consider them for the position, interview them, and if they had some of the foundational things, we would offer, even though they don't have those specifics.
Okay.
If we could find somebody with all of that, we would,
okay.
That would elevate their ability to get the job.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else, Julie?
Okay, anything else? All right, we'll go ahead and move that forward. Then we have the school psychologist salary schedule.
Once or twice in a person's HR career, do you find a position where the limited availability of candidates is so severe that you find that you're at risk for losing your excellent employees and you can't recruit people because they simply aren't there? So we are recommending, we are in a situation like that with school psychologists. And so we're recommending an additional $5,000 be added to the Masters Plus 30 scale and create this new scale for our school psychologists. What it would mean would be that we would, if the board were to approve it, it would approve the salary schedule and we would move our psychologists into the scale and give them all a $5,000 pay increase, and we would want to make that retroactive to the beginning of the year when they come back in August. I have talked to other districts. I've looked at other district pay scales, and I've realized that the scale we had was not adequately compensating psychologists. Claudia has given me input, as well as Amy Walkowitz, who oversees the psychologists, and also the psychologists themselves met with us. And they were very, very professional, but it was very clear that our scale just was not competitive. So that's why we're recommending this. And I think this is one of those salary schedules that we're going to have to monitor very closely. We have 5 openings right now, and Claudia, is it correct that we really don't have any viable candidates that you can really call upon?
No, no. And for the last 2 years that I've been here, both our psychologists have been on overloads because of the lack of psychologists out there and interest in coming to Green Bay based on the salary ranges.
And I'm in contact with a recruitment firm, a headhunter, so to speak, and they have no candidates for us.
How many do we have?
We have 17 now and 19 because we did hire 2 earlier this year.
Right.
They're now- Pardon? We have 5 openings. Mhm. So we think this will help, but all the districts are, very aggressive. And, what we find is that if a district needs maybe 1 or 2, they can be extremely aggressive with the salary because they're not as concerned about internal equity.
Right.
So,
But most, the other districts that we looked at have also moved towards changing the pay scale of the psychologists, because in the past they had been aligned with teacher salaries. But now, with the shortage of psychologists and with the fact that they have to have a master's degree, most of the school districts we compared to have raised the minimum requirements or salary ranges for psychologists.
we also find that if we are trying to recruit anybody who's bilingual, that also becomes far more aggressive in terms of what we have to pay. So we may move our bilingual, we're going to likely move our bilingual staff higher to close to the top of the range, around $70,000. And that is not necessarily the highest wages that those 2 could get if they started to look.
Michelle?
In conversations, a bilingual psychologist, I think that one of the pieces that's very critical is making sure that we accurately identify our students and their needs. And one of the opportunities and challenges with a student whose first language is not English is, are we adequately and accurately assessing their needs? And so to be able to determine, as they do these evaluations for special needs services, that we actually are accurate and not just looking at language barriers and cultural barriers is very critical. So that's why you see other districts putting out even higher amounts. I think some of the pieces that Jean and I talked about, even higher salaries than $70,000 because they have the need and also recognize the importance of accurately identifying students for services, so
And-
they're in high demand.
And our bilingual core team has been recognized and spoken nationally about the model that we have in Green Bay, and that was very concerning to us to ensure that we did not compromise that model in any way, shape, or form.
Well, and these folks can also be in the private sector too, with all the different needs out there for mental health services in private and public. It really, it's a drain on people. It's the numbers.
Yes.
As well.
Chris?
Technical question. With teaching positions, you can hire someone who is working towards certification, but has a background and other things that look that you're comfortable with them in teaching a certain subject, shall we say. Is that available also in terms of finding a school psychologist who may be a psychologist but not certified as a school psychologist?
No.
Is that
No,
the
you're
case?
not allowed to do that. I specifically investigated that this year with the DPI, and it's against ethical and moral.
So just so I'm clear, so even though somebody may be
They
in
could do
a
it under, they
program-
would have to do it like under the direct supervision of a school psychologist. So they could not administer the psychological testing. They can't do run any groups. They can just do it alongside of the other person would have to be there, so it wouldn't help relieve us in any way, shape, or form.
That's a bummer.
Right. Because I was looking at how can we get like some psychologist assistants or whatever, and no, there's strict ethical and moral codes that they have to go by.
But it's a
Well,
good,
I mean, I personally think it's an area that needs to be looked at in terms of what is the real need for them in school districts, and that's a DPI issue, not a local issue. Personally, I think there's over-reliance on how they're needed or included in certain things, but that's my bias.
Right, anything further on that? We'll move forward to the handbook language changes.
Randy will come forward on this. We have two recommended changes on the handbook. The first one is related to the employee supervision and evaluation. As you're aware, we will be implementing the educator effectiveness standards at the beginning of the school year. And so what we did is we added just some language that states that we will comply with the Department of Public Instruction. That's the first part, the shaded part in yellow on the document that you see. And we are on purpose not becoming any more detailed in this because things are changing under educator effectiveness continuously, and Ann Barsh is always keeping us abreast of those changes. But basically, we're just going to say we will comply, and we think we'll be covered. And then the second part is we are recommending an evaluation appeal process that would allow the employee to bring forward any concerns that they have regarding the evaluation that they receive, and you can read the steps, but essentially they would call attention in writing to their immediate supervisor within 7 days. And many times, and this is already happening, the supervisor and the employee resolve it at that level. And in most cases, I would say that's what would happen. But if they couldn't resolve it, they would then bring in myself or a designee, and then we would facilitate a meeting between the employee, the supervisor, and whoever the appropriate district level leadership person would be. That would most likely be Kim, Terry, Mark, or Andrea. And we would try to resolve the evaluation. And we've done this before, and the employee has representation from their union if they so choose, or somebody else. And what we try to do is look at the facts. What was the evaluation? What is the concern of the employee? What is the observations that have occurred? How was it communicated to the employee? And resolve it. With educator effectiveness, everything will be documented in TeachScape. So we will be able to pull up Teachscape, and if it's there, it's there. If it's not, it's not. And so, you know, the goal is to have an accurate evaluation. And that's, and to allow the employee to have voice if they feel there's a concern.
Any questions, comments?
I assume you keep us abreast if there are any problems with this new procedure, or
Yes.
obviously if many concerns on a particular area, you share that with the appropriate administrator downtown.
Just one quick, Jean, I know that when we talked about it, you went out and looked to see what other districts are doing. Could you comment on that, please?
Actually, Randy did that. I don't want
Okay,
to address
if you
that.
could, what you found?
Yeah, essentially, there are not other districts who are even looking at this as an option right now in the educator effectiveness process. So we are actually ahead of the curve and offering an opportunity for administrators and employees to have a process to go through to formally engage in conversations when there is some discussion of or disagreement on the evaluation itself.
Why wouldn't we include an opportunity in the unlikely event it was necessary for someone to appeal to the superintendent and or the board?
We really feel that it's an evaluation. It isn't discipline. The employee can always write a rebuttal or a statement that becomes part of the evaluation and is placed in their file. It's very important that we think that the people who are doing the evaluation, the principal, for example, as well as anybody that they bring in to do help with the evaluation, and they do that, that what they're observing and documenting is as factual as it can be, and that the review would be Terry, Mark, Claudia, you know, people who are aware of that employee's performance can come in and actually observe as well, that they are the ones that should have final voice. If it goes beyond that, I think it would be difficult if you weren't there observing to actually make a determination whether or not the evaluation was factual. In the cases that we had an individual who had a specialty area, and the principal called in a person who was more expert than the principal in that area, and had that individual come in and observe. So they do bring in people who are more knowledgeable. But if you as a board member would come in, I'd see, in order for you to overturn it, you would be, how would you know whether or not the evaluation was factual if you hadn't been intimately involved?
Well, I guess I may not know how factual an evaluation is, although I might surprise you, or any one of us might surprise you in our areas of expertise, but I don't know if I would know correct or incorrect if I saw it but I think I would have a good sense for fair or unfair if I saw that. And I guess that's my concern. Right now, your review docs don't have all that much to do unless you're on a POA of plan of assistance. I use an acronym.
Thank you, Andrew.
So the fact of being put on a plan of assistance is of noteworthy consequence to your career. But with educator effectiveness, every review is going to be of serious concern to has the potential to be of serious concern to your career. And we've seen how far other places have taken it, which I don't hope that we would go that far, but we might also be ordered to go that far. And I guess that's my concern going forward, is we're putting something that doesn't have a lot of appeal levels in now. Well, it's not really life or death to your career, but then it might be. I mean, there's a neighboring school district that if you don't hit a certain level on educator effectiveness, it says in their policy you won't be continued. We can only support an educator at level blank for not more than 3 years. So that's what concerns me. And as rosy of a picture is painted about educator effectiveness, you can say as much as you want about behaviors being documented, and I'm sure the system can be good. I'm sure the system can probably be done very well, or maybe even very, very well. But those are going to be really high stakes review scores, whether or not they're tied to pay, and that's my concern, is that we have that's my concern, I guess. So there are, of the tens of thousands of educator effectiveness reviews that will take place over the next 10 years, there will be unfair or vindictive evaluators in more than 1 out of 10,000. Or I will, at that time, after 10,000 have completed, I'll buy the whole room that's your lunch.
I mean, I would see the role of HR is to make sure that that does not happen.
Right, and just, Mr. Becker, if I could, the reality is my charge to staff from you, if I'm understanding my charge accurately as part of management, is to coach up and to provide resource and build capacity. That's the right driver, because the better teachers we have, the more improved student achievement. And I think, Katie, you say that often.
Yes.
And that's our philosophy, and that's our understanding of where we need to go. And so, should you hear that we're not being fair, then I'm not doing my job. That's really the reality. I think we're very clear on what the right driver is.
We've had a commitment to support first.
And I am speaking of a long-term future, though, that certainly could include people at a higher level than this room deciding that all teachers in the state of Wisconsin have to be educator effectiveness level 3 or not continue. I mean, then all of a sudden this has become a career threatening thing. Not now.
Yeah.
And not the people in this room, but it could be.
Well, and
I guess if I guess at least I'm saying it, so if we get there, if we get to a point where we're ordered by someone to have this scoring procedure be career threatening, then we probably would need additional safety levels, probably. Mark?
If I may, I wanted to echo what Michelle was saying. It certainly, if we do educator effectiveness correctly, it really is, it's not about the accountability in catching somebody doing something wrong. It's about supporting them through that process of continuous growth and improvement. I believe also previously we didn't have an appeal process like this in place. So this is an actual additional process that we're putting into place moving into educator effectiveness, if I'm correct. So previously, prior Act 10, we didn't have that. So I think that again speaks to Jean's comprehensiveness in terms of thinking about how do we anticipate some of the innate tension that our staff members will feel, as you indicated, Mr. Becker, and we want to support them through that process. So I offer that as context.
And if I could just add a little more context, prior to Act 10, when arbitration was still alive, evaluations typically were not grievable under a grievance procedure unless they were disciplined. You had to establish that an evaluation was disciplinary. So there was typically no appeal process for an evaluation. This is quite more than what usually was in place in collective bargaining agreements prior to Act 10.
And it's certainly appreciated. I just want to make sure, and I hate to say when and not if, but when we are ordered by somebody to have review scores become career threatening, I just hope at that point that you would need extra levels. Hope I'm wrong, but yeah. Anything else on this? Okay, thank you. We'll move that forward, and that is the final item on the organizational support work session.
There's one more thing.
Oh, there's I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's just a very, a change under the substitute educators, the number of days that we are going to require substitute teachers to work in a given year from 10 to 20. Randy and I talked to the sub-union board about this, and they were very supportive of it. I think many of them do work this number of days, and we need subs. And so this is what we're going to recommend to the board. There certainly will be times when a substitute can't do the time, and that happens now. And so generally they contact Randy, and we understand that they can stay on because of certain circumstances, usually health related.
Chris?
I read through this the other day, so I didn't go back to it now, but is there anything there, because I know some people like to pick and choose, and sometimes that's to the districts and students' benefit, and other times it isn't. Times it might not be of interest to the student and district would be saying, I'll never work a Monday or I'll never work a Friday. Is that something that's been addressed here or not?
It isn't addressed in policy, but I will tell you that as we move to the new subsystem called ASOP, you can see if an employee is checking themselves unavailable any day of the week, and you can see the pattern. And we are going to message out that we will not have people be completely unavailable on Mondays or Fridays, which are the 2 days of our highest need. And that they have to work a number of those days. So
I could see a legitimate exception to that. At least one other person here probably will too. If I'm a grandparent and there are set days I babysit for my grandchild or children, but that could be accounted for by approaching HR.
yes.
So would you look at the end of the year, and if someone didn't complete 20 unless they could justify it, then they would come off of our sub list?
You want to just
Yeah, that's our current practice now. We start analyzing through after the first of the year, and somewhere towards the end of March, early April, we send out a letter to people we are projecting that aren't going to make the 10 days, and then give them an appeal process indicating why it was they may not be able to meet that 10 days. I can tell you I've had a half a dozen or more responses that have said, I had a personal family crisis, I wasn't available, and we allow them to continue for the most part. But back to your point as well, there are exceptions to that. When in talking with the sub-teacher union, the interesting response from them is that we have enough people who want to pick up work, and those people who aren't available Monday and Wednesday might be taking the really good jobs on Tuesday and Thursday, and we're being forced to take the Mondays and Fridays. And so we hear just as much from the sub-teacher union as well. We would like to encourage you to ask people to work more, because we have some professional substitute teachers who really want to work every day of the week if they have an opportunity. And those people who are picking up that 7, 8, 9 days are taken away from their opportunity to pick up more days. So we want to encourage and entice them to sub for us more versus looking elsewhere, because we don't have any openings. So there is a little bit of that goes in our conversations, and as far as wanting to increase the amount of time.
We had, Randy asked Janet Weiner, who oversees our subsystem, she's our clerical in HR. We have 319 sub-teachers, and this year we inactivated only 5 of those people because they were hired in another district and they didn't work the time. So it's very few people that actually come off the list.
Do you ever have a circumstance where maybe someone's a retired teacher from a elementary building, wants to keep connection to that building, and maybe, just wants to sign up for that building, but then they might never hit their 20? Is that a problem for someone in that kind of situation?
I don't think it happens a lot. We really discourage people from saying, I only want to work in this building, because we have needs, so many needs all over. And, they can pick up the majority of hours in a building, but we need them to be a bit more flexible than that.
Okay.
I mean, really only 5 of the 319 were inactivated this year. So teachers, they're really working. We just want to encourage people to work more. That's why the 20, because we have the need.
Okay. All right, anything else on this? Yeah, we'll move that forward, and then that will conclude the work session.
All right, thank you, Andrew. And we have a closed session. I'll read that motion. Special board meeting closed session has been scheduled for Monday, July 14th, immediately following the adjournment of the work session meetings at the Green Bay Area Public Schools District Office Building, room 337. Pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, and pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851F, considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons, except where paragraph B applies, which if discussed in public would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data or involved in such problems or investigations, to wit, personnel matters and possible restructuring of the administration regarding specific employees. Pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, more specifically to wit, potential property contracts. And pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851G, conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved, to wit, potential litigation matters. The meeting will begin in open session to consider the appropriate motion for a closed session so provided by law.
So moved.
Second.
Sandy?
Warren?
Aye.
Becker? Blackout? Maloney?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Franz?
Carried 6-0, and we'll move across the hall.
What's your tomorrow?
For more information or to obtain copies of this program, contact CISA 7 Interactive Learning Services at 920-465-5218.